Right. Hi, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's LEAP webinar. I'm Nora, your host for our session From Reactive to Proactive, Mastering Resource Management Maturity. And it's so great to have you all here. We've got a packed room, super excited to kick off the session. As a new work and transformation consultant, I support organizations in shifting toward more dynamic, people-centered and effective ways of working, and resource management maturity plays a crucial role in that transformation. Whether you're just starting out or looking to level up your resource management capabilities, today's session will help you amplify the impact of your resource management function using the RMI's maturity model. Stop sharing my screen, and I would love to get a sense for who's here with us today in this virtual room with over 40 attendees. So we've prepared a short poll. Edem, if you could launch it, that would be wonderful, just to get a sense for how familiar you are with the resource management maturity model by the RMI, from very familiar and you use it actively over somewhat familiar, you've heard about it, to not familiar at all. Just curious to see if you might have encountered this model before. And we'll give it a few more seconds. Feel free to vote. And Edem, feel free to close the poll now. Let's see where we stand. Here we go. Okay, we've got about 35%. So it's a tie. Use and know the model very often, are actively using it. 35%, the same amount of people have heard of it somehow, a little bit, and only 29% are not familiar with it at all. Okay, very cool. So hopefully for those in the last bucket and those 29% after the session today, you will move up at least one level, talking about maturity, for everyone to move up one level. That's the goal of the session today. Thanks so much for helping us get a sense for who's here. All right, so this webinar is part of Runn's LEAP webinar series, and LEAP is all about igniting the future of resource management. At Run, we believe resource management is more than just schedules and spreadsheets. It's about creating smarter and more human-centered ways of working. And with LEAP, with this webinar program, our goal is to challenge the traditional approaches, spark fresh ideas, and bring inspiring new perspectives to the resource management community, to all of you. So together we are exploring what the future of resource management could and should look like. This webinar is brought to you by Runn, and Runn helps teams effortlessly match the right people to the right work, making resource management smoother, smarter, and less of a headache. We'll use the last about 10 minutes for question and answers. So as soon as we're diving into a topic that you find interesting and you might want to learn more, feel free to capture it. There is a specific section here in Zoom webinar called Q&A. Feel free to hit that Q&A button, share your question. Also feel very invited to use the chat to share any thoughts. There's also the option here in Zoom to react to anything we say. So if you really resonate with something, also feel free to share some love. It's always lovely for us because we can't see you to know you're there. That makes us very, very happy. Cool. And before we kick in, it's my absolute pleasure and honor, really, to introduce our two incredible speakers today. First, we have Ryan Childers, Managing Director of the Resource Management Institute. What a legend. Ryan is a trailblazer in resource management and the driving force behind the RMI, with a background in just-in-time resourcing and years of experience in consulting and leadership. He helps organizations build strategic, mature resource management functions that deliver real business value. Ryan, there's so much more to say about you, but I'll leave it at that for now. It's such a pleasure to have you join our session today.
Oh, thank you. Gosh, those are some big words there. Happy to be here and looking forward to a great session here. So thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And next up, we've got Matt Webb, Senior Solution Consultant at Runn. Matt helps organizations move from reactive to proactive resource planning. And at Runn, he brings the RMI maturity model to life by aligning tools, strategy, and people-first practices to really optimize resource management and boost organizational agility. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us today. It's so nice to have you on the panel.
Thank you so much, Nora, and very, very excited to be a part of this conversation. This is a very popular topic right now, so very happy to be partnering up with Ryan and the team to talk more about it.
Fantastic. Awesome. So in our webinar today, we will explore how you can amplify the value of resource management using the RMI's maturity model. And we'll be sharing insights on overcoming challenges, selecting the right tools, and really securing leadership buy-in to take resource management to the next level. So I would suggest let's kick right off and dive into our very first question, which starts with the why. So the resource management maturity model has been around for some time. So why are we talking about this, Ryan? Why does the resource management maturity model matter? And how does it really support organizations in advancing their resource management function?
That is a great question. I love starting with the why. As I dive into it, one thing I thought I might do, especially with some of the poll results, we'll have to go back to our records and see. I think we took an informal poll on where we thought that would end up. I'm not sure which one of us was right there, but interesting to see a third, right? Very familiar. Some still learning about it, and some who are brand new to it. I almost wonder if some that are new to the model are also new to the RMI. So maybe let me do just a really quick introduction to the RMI and kind of what that's all about to then segue into, okay, why are we talking resource management maturity and kind of bring that to life. So just a quick way of introduction. So I appreciate all the kind words, Nora, on my introduction, but it's nice to be with you all here. As Nora said, I'm Ryan Childers. I'm the managing director of the RMI. Just as we think about the Resource Management Institute, a little bit of background here. So we've been around since 2016. And since that time, so we're almost coming up on 10 years as an institute. Over the last 9 years, we've grown to be an over 4,000 member community of resource management professionals. So let's put that in perspective for just a second. So that means there are over 4,000 people that have found us and are as interested in resource management as you are. And so I think that's a really, really big deal. And this is a community of professionals that are all coming together to try to figure this thing out. And so as an institute, the best way to think about the RMI is we are 100% dedicated to the advancement of resource and workforce management, education, thought leadership, best practices, and standards. And the way we attack that and the way we try to provide that is through our thought leadership white papers, our market research and benchmark data. We promote industry collaboration events and participate in events just like this one to share a lot of insight on the resource management topic. Of course, we have our globally recognized training and certification program that we call RMCP, which, by the way, a really, really cool thing that I want to compliment Runn on is making the investment in putting some of their folks through the RMCP program. That foundation is super valuable to share with the customer base, and I think that's a really big deal. So really encouraged there. As part of that RMCP program, we teach our just-in-time resourcing brand of global resource management, and we're going to talk about some of the elements as part of today's session. And it's really the backbone. That methodology is really the backbone for the resource management maturity model. And so you're going to see some of those things pop out in there. And that maturity model, I'll say it's been around for a few years. It's on a couple of different iterations. So we continue to improve it, as we learn what's happening in the industry. And this is one of those things that as we took it to market, we've been just blown away at the response to it. And, we have seen the need around having a maturity model in place And so as we start to transition into, okay, why does this matter? Why is it a big deal? I'll just offer just a little bit of background and perspective. And so, I would say to us, it matters a great deal. And to RMI members that have found it, I think we all would agree, it's a really good asset for the RMI community. And I'll tell you, it's something that is available for free. So it's not something anyone has to pay for. It's readily available as part of participating in this session. We're going to share copies of it so that when we ask that survey question again, are you familiar with the model? It's going to be 100% yes, we are. We've dug into it and we are actively using it. That's our hope out of all this. And so the background on why this matters, let's just kind of think about resource management maturity, and let's think about maturity models in general. So, acknowledging the fact that resource management is still a pretty emerging discipline. People have been assigning resources to projects for some time now. That's the easy part. And I love, as part of the introduction to Runn, it's more than just assigning people or staffing people to projects. It's more than just spreadsheets. That's what I think of as professionalizing the resource management discipline. And that's really started to emerge over the last 20 years or so. And so that's been a big deal. When you compare resource management, if you just think about it compared to other processes, project management, quality processes, we have some overall maturing and development to continue to do in order to occupy the same level of mind share in the C-suite that those other disciplines occupy today. And so, think about maturity models. So maturity models have existed for a long, long time in a lot of different domains, a lot of different, capabilities. And so they've been around, and the way we think about a maturity model is it's really there, any maturity model is really there to help you assess the level of sophistication and effectiveness in whatever that capability might be. And so, why the maturity model matters in resource management, what it does a nice job of doing is it answers a question that we've been asked for a long time. Could you just tell us what good looks like? Could you just show us the path to effective resource management? And so it lays out a multi-step process to get into that good element of an effective resource management capability. And it's there to help you assess where you are today in terms of your level of sophistication, your level of effectiveness, not just in resource management as a whole, but in all the different functional areas that go into all the gears that make resource management work. And then it gives you a structured path. And it's a structured path that's based on all of our experience with RMI members, all of our experience in the RMCP classroom, all of our experience consulting with organizations across the globe, harnessing all of that and creating a path that everyone can use to plot a course to driving improvement and getting more mature in resource management. So if you want to click to the next slide, I'll say one of the reasons we created the maturity model in the first place is we got asked a series of questions. And again, it goes back to, could you just give us the answer? What does good look like? And then help us along the way. Could we lock arms with you? And could you show us how we start to move in that direction? And, a lot of times outside perspective is really important as we drive improvement. And so, starting to get a feel for, if we look outside of our four walls in our organization, what are other organizations doing? And where do we stand in all of our resource management capabilities, all of our functional areas? Where do we stand to our peer group? And so that, when you take all that and kind of bring it together, that's why the maturity model matters. It is the blueprint to help you assess and plot a course to getting more mature and driving greater value out of your resource management function.
Fantastic. What a great foundation you've just laid, Ryan. Thank you so much. And I think something that also really strikes me as really important, especially on the back of the Resource Management Global Symposium we just had, is that the value of resource management is really front and center, right? And the model also helps to kind of make that more visible, to communicate the value of resource management to the leadership team, right? It helps them to connect to what is this function all about, what are we doing, and helping showcase the progress made in quite a really relatable way. Matt, maybe what is your thinking around the why of the model? Anything else?
No, I think that's an excellent point. And just to to second what Ryan was saying. It's all about being able to, share the value of resource management. And I know in our experience, one of the ways that is often done is through a business case. So building the business case and presenting that to leadership to help not just establish the value, but also the purpose. So there's a lot of operational leaders that we speak to that are just helping their company enter that resource management domain for the first time. And at that point, sometimes they don't know what they don't know. And so what they're doing is they're taking the value of resource management and they're positioning that within a business case to help highlight, okay, here's the impact of resource management, not just within one space, but across the entire business. Here's how it helps drive, strategic initiatives. The RMI is actually a great resource for content that you can use for putting that together as well. But one thing I do want to hit on is just keeping leadership up to date on your progress too, as you're advancing that maturity. And one thing that we found to be quite effective is showing that starting point. So here's where we're starting and here's where we're heading. And being able to, highlight those key milestones of, if we continue to develop our skills inventory, as an example, we can better leverage our resources. We can better leverage the talent across our workforce, potentially making us a more competitive business. And also just increasing employee satisfaction, because if you give people the opportunity to exercise that talent and that skill sets, the quality of that work will be higher and the satisfaction of your employees will be a lot higher as well.
Amen. Yeah, thank you so much for outlining that, which leads us perfectly to the second question, which is exactly on the point of how can resource managers, we've got over 60 here in the room, leverage the model to gain leadership buy-in very practically. So we've got the model, we've got our resource management function, might be one person, might be a whole team, but how exactly can we leverage the model now for a compelling case? What are some best practices and tips here? Ryan, could you maybe just build on what we've already kind of outlined so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. And Matt set it up, I think really, really well. Excuse me, with some of the things he mentioned. Where I would start is, acknowledging the fact that it's a tool, right? So it's a tool that's out there, it's readily available. And so I would start there. So if we think about just practical advice, go get the tool, spend some time with it, dig into it, think about each of the areas that we prescribe in the tool. And again, those map back to just-in-time resourcing. But then as you get into it, take advantage of, there's a complementary tool that comes alongside the maturity model, and that's a self-assessment guide. And so the guide, another free tool, take the guide and put yourself through the paces of assessing where you are in each of those functional areas. And the best advice I can give you is to absolutely 100% be honest. Be honest with where you are today. And I think what you'll find is a couple of outcomes will come out of that assessment. I think number one, it's going to signal to you where you have strengths in what you're doing today. And those are the strengths, highlighting those to leadership. Matt, I think you did a super job articulating that. Highlight those strengths to leadership and allow them to see what good is already happening. And then think about where those opportunities are to turn the screws on resource management and drive even greater value out of it. And I think you've got to be honest there and share that with leadership as well. And then out of that pops a couple of things. What I would look at is focusing on outcomes and value. And so the idea would be, okay, here's where we are today. If we were to plot a course and we were to make an investment in improving this thing, that thing, and the other thing, we're going to focus on these three areas. Here are the outcomes we expect as a result of that. And then here's the value that that's going to throw off. And as much of that value as you can tie back to strategic business objectives, You can tie back to financial impact. Now you're going to start to catch leadership's attention. The more you can tie it back to financials, the more focus you're going to get. That's what everybody wants to, whether it's cost savings or, better utilization, better project margins, whatever it might be. That's what you want to tap into. That's the vision leadership wants to subscribe to, wants to invest in order to get there. So
Amazing.
I think that's a big piece to it, and just acknowledging there's no harm, no shame in wherever you're starting. You're starting where you're starting. And one of the best examples I've seen out of the maturity model and putting it to use comes from a longtime RMI member, LMI. So LMI has been at our events. They've shared some different sessions. They've been really open about sharing their success stories. And so LMI tells a great story where they came in and found the RMI, got into the maturity model, and when they were honest, they said, "Hey, we're at ground zero. We're at ground zero and we're getting started. We're going to plot a course," and they got to level 2.5 in a year. And so what that ended up doing is, if we think about outcomes and value, that saved the company. I can't tell you the exact number, but what I will tell you is that saved the company, and being able to get to 2.5 saved that company millions of dollars in redeployment costs. So what they were able to do, better resource management, enabled them to redeploy resources instead of going outside the organization and hiring net new resources. And the savings to the organization was in the millions. Okay. Awesome. Great. We love it. That caught our attention. That caught leadership's attention. We love when we have those kinds of success stories that folks can come out and tell them, here's what that did. That put them on the map. That got them nominated for awards internally, and they're now off to the races, right? And so that's been a really, really big deal for them. And so, that's just the power of being able to harness the model and demonstrate to leadership the impact resource management can have. But it all ties back to being able to align with strategic business objectives and the value that resource management can create for the organization.
Yeah, such a powerful case study, super inspiring. And we hope that many people here in the room will be able to follow suit. And I think,
They are, I would just add, Shannon and Desiree at LMI, they tell that story really, really well. And obviously, when you have impact in the millions, that's a big deal. That's a really, really big deal. And so they're super, super invested and have done just a tremendous job in their organization.
amazing. And looking at the economical situation at the moment, it's so uplifting to really see how the RM function can have this impact, right? This very positive impact despite all the turbulence going on. So kudos to all the resource managers out there. You're real heroes saving the organization so much money. And I think what I'm picking up on, like listening to both of you, is a common theme from many webinars now, which is it's key to gain leadership buy-in for resource management. And it's very clever to look at the strategic objectives of the leadership team. What are they really trying to achieve, right? And then basically translating that into the resource management function. How can we contribute to each of those strategic pillars the leadership team is after? And in our prep, I asked you a question, Ryan, and I'm just so keen to share with everyone, which is around where do you feel like is the biggest financial lever, right? You mentioned that LMI was able to have this huge financial impact. In their instance, it was basically better deployment internally. When you look across organizations, what are some other financial levers where we can get those, cost savings, which will basically support the leadership in their mission?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, every organization is probably a little bit different, but if I'm painting with a broad brush across RMI members, the biggest one that jumps out to me is obviously in forecasting. So forecasting is likely the most difficult of all the resource management functions to master, but it's also the biggest opportunity to drive significant value. And it is the mechanism to allow us to move from a reactive model to a more proactive model. And the two words that come to mind for me every time I think about forecasting is, with effective forecasting comes visibility and comes time. With time and visibility, it's amazing the problems we can solve and the things that we can do. If we just simplify resource management down to, when we think about resource management excellence, it's about being able to consistently and predictably get the right person in the right place at the right time. And so when we define that and kind of peel some of the layers back, it's having the right resource, so right role, right skills, right availability, also at the right cost point. And so, too many times, if we have to scramble and source something and staff something really, really quickly, we're just going to throw a body at it. And that body may not have the right skills. All right, that puts our project at risk. That body may be way overqualified for the work we're asking them to do, and they come at a senior level and a senior level of cost. Now, all of a sudden, our project margin's in trouble. And so with visibility and with time, we have the ability to more consistently and predictably get the right person in the right place at the right time. And in doing that, here's the big resource management financial lever: you drive optimal utilization. And so optimal utilization, one of the things that we talk about is understanding what is 1 point of utilization worth in your organization. And so, if we think about it through the lens of an organization that's doing billable work, 1 point of utilization for one resource over the course of an entire year, it's just easy math based on a 2080 denominator, it's squeezing an additional 20.8 additional billable hours out of that resource. Now, if you take that and scale it across your organization and model it up, what if we can raise overall utilization by 1 point, 20.8 billable hours out of each resource, the financial impact is pretty significant. And if you go from 1 point to 2 points to 3 points to 5 points, now all of a sudden your significant impact gets even bigger. And so that's where, we start to see this really, really get interesting, and especially for leadership.
Nice, nice, very exciting.
I was just going to add, I mean, that's probably one of the first topics I would say that is brought up when we're talking about aligning technology with strategy, because it's the biggest challenge that a lot of people face right now, because they don't have that long-term look. They sometimes can only see a month out or 3 months out. So it's really tough to make those decisions early, and like Ryan was saying, be proactive and be able to hold those levers. And we're talking, of course, about the maturity model. And I think as you do become more mature, you start to gain a longer range outlook. So you put yourself in a better position to make those decisions early. And it goes back to demonstrating to leadership too, the value of resource management, and also the value of the resource management model, because it's putting you in a position to identify those risks early, and identify them before they become emergencies, which is what no one wants. So I think having that visibility, tying in with your forecasting, the very tight relationship between those two.
Beautiful. And again, a beautiful segue into question number 3, which is role that tools and tech play in advancing the maturity of the resource management function. So we've already covered a lot when it comes to visibility. Ryan, if you just take a step back, maybe can you answer this question? So we want to move up, that's clear. We want to get more mature. How can tools and tech support resource management functions in that pursuit?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the tools and technology and resource management are absolutely essential. And, the tools have to be in place in order to automate resource management processes. If you're going to do this at scale, at, really any level. And so for me, I think there's a point, right? There's a point where you can get by in spreadsheets, and that point probably varies from organization to organization. But the analogy I like to use in resource management in general is a lot of times it behaves like a giant house of cards. And so I've seen the best spreadsheet wizards put the house of cards together, get that thing built, and then all of a sudden something happens, and it comes in and disrupts our plan for where resources are going to be deployed. And so it's like ripping one of the cards out from our house of cards. Now all of a sudden you've got to rework the entire spreadsheet. And that's a challenge. And so, if you're a 10-person shop, all right, you can probably survive in spreadsheets. Maybe you get up to 20, maybe you get up to 30, but eventually you have to, if you're going to really mature in resource management, you have to make the investment in a commercial, off the shelf, aligned with leading practices tool that takes your resource management practices and automates them. And I would append a few things to one of the sayings we like is technology is an enabler, but it'll never be the silver bullet. And so it's a combination of process and technology and people, quite frankly, working hand in hand, locking arms and going at this together. And so some of the things technology wise that just have to be in place, and Runn does a really nice job of enabling this, is number one, you've got to make the investment in that commercial grade solution. Users have to be enabled to know how to utilize the system. So it's got to be optimized and put in place, and they've got to be trained and ready to go. And then that system, whatever it might be, that system has to be integrated front end and back end into the overall organizational technological ecosystem, right? And so, we're dependent, resource management sits in the middle of a lot of data. And so we're dependent on a lot of inputs, we're producing outputs. And so that integration piece, I think, is absolutely essential as well. So that's the long way of saying technology, the investment has to be there in order to mature. And it especially kicks in at a point. And again, that point might be different from organization to organization, but the investment's got to be there in purchasing, in implementing correctly, in driving adoption, and then integrating into the ecosystem.
Yeah, well said. And what I think is so exciting about it, it helps resource managers make that shift from tactical to strategic, right? By automating, by getting so much support from a tool, you are just capable of, seeing the bigger picture. Matt, I'm super curious to also pick your plane.
Yeah, this is obviously a topic I know a thing or two about being on the Runn side. But I will say I was really happy to hear Ryan talk about the process before anything else. We talk about that internally, of having the process before you go out and procure any tool at all, because it's really important that you have that process in place that everyone is bought into. You have a process that maps to the tool, so that tool can also map to your strategic objectives and strategic priorities. And to Ryan's point, we've seen firsthand what happens when that deck of cards starts to sway a little bit, and projects start to slip, and resources become a little burnt out. Maybe you start to see attrition tick up a bit. I mean, that was a driving force behind why Runn was created. And so it's not just about investing in a tool, it's also about investing in the right tool, and a tool that provides that visibility to help you keep maturing your resource management function. And we'll dive into this a bit later, but that lack of visibility is often the biggest challenge that I think a lot of organizations face, because they have this information spread across, like Ryan was saying, so many different systems, so many different spreadsheets. And it gets you to a certain point where you have to stop and kind of look in the mirror and ask yourself, hey, is this scalable? Is this going to help us keep maturing as an organization and help keep maturing on our resource management path as well?
Yeah, amazing. And Ryan, when we had our prep calls, you mentioned this threshold. So I hope you don't mind me sharing it. I just found it quite useful as a kind of benchmark. You mentioned that the trigger to go to basically an automation solution depends, of course, on the context of the organization. But if you have an organization or a department bigger than 50 people, it usually makes sense to move beyond spreadsheets, right? So, I mean, that's a helpful guidance on that end.
Yeah, I think so. So helpful guidance, and I would treat it as guidance. I don't know that there's a magic number that it has to be 50 plus or minus. I think every organization's different. What are the nature of assignments? If you're a 50-person shop that's filled with set it and forget it long-term engagements, that probably works in a spreadsheet. If you're a 20-person shop and you've got a whole bunch of small choppy assignments, everything's constantly moving and changing, they need to invest in technology at a much lower number. And so just a rough guideline there.
Thank you. I find it very helpful. And nice. So
And
yeah.
no, I just wanted to add one more thing. Just going back to the question you asked at the beginning around why the resource management maturity model matters. Because when we talk about the tool, when we talk about the technology, it's really important, of course, to align that with your objectives and your maturity. And I think why the model matters so much is because it really becomes the backbone of a company's strategic vision. Because without your resources working efficiently and they're not overutilized, not burning out, you have no one to support those objectives. Like your people quite literally are the heart and soul of your company. So I think it's paramount to also find tools that not only align with that strategic vision, but also are a good fit for you as a company and are fit for where you're at within that maturity model and where you are today and where you want to be a year from now, and maybe even where you want to be 3 years from now. So I think it's also about ensuring that, hey, yes, this tool, this technology offers a lot, but is it the right fit for us?
Yeah, nice. Thank you so much for the add-on. Couldn't agree more. Next question is around, so we have these different stages of maturity in the model, right? So Ryan, could you maybe outline what are the essential must-haves or key markers to be mindful of as your RMO matures? What are the non-negotiables to move to the next stage?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we have a slide we can
We surely
share
do,
here.
Ryan. We're so prepared.
So, for good reason. This is a topic we, spent a lot of time talking about and really trying to make sure we understood. And this is something that we shared, a little over a year ago at RMI Connect, in our opening session. I was doing the session with Gary Becker, who started the RMO at AWS, and really grew that organization inside of AWS. And so we sat down and we were looking at, okay, as we think about the overall journey to resource management excellence and all the maturation that needs to happen in order to start to get there, what are some of the key things that we ought to plant a flag and say, okay, this is where we really can start to measure our progress and think about, the key steps along the way. And so, for us, it starts with making the investment in establishing an RMO. And Nora, you said it well earlier, that could be an RMO of one, an army of one or an army of many. But having the formal investment in the organization, you have an RMO in place, and I would append to that, you have a charter in behind it. And I see Gary Ward's here with us. Gary does a really nice job of talking about the charter at Guidewire, and he's held sessions, power-ups on the charter itself. Such an important ingredient to stick in behind your RMO, and that's really there to establish for the organization the purpose of the resource management function, and it becomes a strategic vehicle that you can then take on the road and use to drive awareness of what resource management is, what it's been empowered to do, and all the focus areas and all those things, and the places where we need input from sources across the organization. So the RMO, I think, is super, super important. Number two, that I would highlight, and this is one that I think is a big philosophical shift in a lot of organizations, it's growing out of a siloed mentality and starting to acknowledge that resources are assets of the overall organization. They don't belong to a particular manager or a particular department. And when we enable the RMO to do its thing and to work its magic, remember, one of our big outcomes is we want to optimize the utilization of our resources. And so if we view them as being an asset to the organization, we can start to put the puzzle together with that in mind. And so that's a big marker, I think, for many organizations. And then, then I start to get a little bit into the weeds of resource management with these markers. Can we simply do we know, for the population of people we're responsible for keeping busy, do we understand them? Can we characterize our supply? Do we know what roles they have the capability to play? Do we know what skills they possess? Do we know how much of their time is available to be booked on projects, and what else they have on their plate that they have to account for? And so being able to check the box and say, you know what, we know exactly who we have and exactly what they can do. And that's the long way of saying we have a skills inventory in place, and that's sitting out there, and we've got central visibility into all of those resources that are assets to the organization. And then number 4 for us in terms of markers is really using a big word here to talk about forecasting. And so, it's one thing, we see a lot of organizations that spike the football when they get that first pipeline report from the sales organization that shows them what sales thinks they're going to close, or they start to get visibility into, and for internal organizations, that list of potential projects. But can we take that visibility? Can we decompose it into the roles and the skills that we're going to need? Do we understand the availability that we're going to need as well? And can we sit down on a regular basis with those that generate demand, those that are responsible for managing supply? Can we sit down and interlock with them and truly validate our demand is real, it's accurate, it's up to date? Our assigned resources, wherever we've got them deployed on our resource management chessboard, those are still valid. We know when they're going to peel off of those projects and they're going to be available for us to put on something else. That interlock function is super important to have in place, and have it in place consistently across the organization. And then number 5 goes back to the previous question about the role and the importance of technology. And I know we're going to talk about this some in our Q&A. I saw that question out there. There's a limit on how mature you can get without having an enterprise resource management application or a PSA PPM solution in place. And then the back part of that is what we mentioned earlier. The organization has to adopt the tool, know how to use it. And I would even add another word to this. The organization's committed to utilizing it. So no more doing stuff outside the system or anything like that. So I think these are the markers that came to mind a year or so ago, and I think they're all still relevant as we think about that journey to resource management excellence, and we think about the path that we're all trying to be on.
Yeah, fantastic, Marcus. Super helpful, and a good outline to help us understand what we can look out for. I know that the model is very complex, so this is a good look from above on the key pointers. Matt, before we hear your perspective, I just wanted to call out to everyone dialing in today that we're super curious also to pick 1 or 2 questions from you in this live webinar. So feel very invited to now share some of the questions you might have here so we can tackle them. And now, Matt, would love to hear from you on this point of what does it take to move up?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I have too much more to add in the way of additional insights. I would just really second what Ryan was saying around point number 1, which is the importance of having an RMO in place. And why I think this is so relevant is there's a lot of change happening right now across a lot of organizations globally. And what we've been seeing recently is there's a lot of organizational restructuring. There's sometimes a flattening of an organization where one resource is not just belonging to a team. And I think Ryan put it really well. They're becoming an asset of an entire organization. So they're looking at, let's say, Nora as a resource, and Nora has a particular skill set. This skill set can't just be used by one particular team, this is a skill set that can be used across the entire organization. So what are we doing to fully maximize, again, the talent and skill set that Nor brings to us as an organization? And you're starting to see this sort of centralization of resources within organizations, and you're consolidating, 5 or 6 different resource pools into one. And that in itself is also helping organizations continue to mature their resource management operations. Operations is now looking at, okay, we're not just operations, we're operations and resource management. And you're starting to see them build out an entirely separate function just dedicated towards resource management. And I think that has also helped surfacing the true value of resource management for executive leaders, because they're starting to see, like, hey, again, it goes back to what we were sharing earlier, the purpose of resource management, the purpose of our resources and what they bring to our company. And if you can fully maximize that resource and their skill sets, of course, not too much and making them overutilized, but being able to maximize that, and the cascading effect that has across projects, strategic objectives, revenue lines, cost lines, and everything. So there's a lot there to unpack, but I thought Ryan summed it up pretty well in terms of the key markers there.
Yeah, amazing. And thanks for your addition. It's always helpful to have, certain points highlighted. Oh, a question is coming in, so I would like to prioritize that. Thank you so much, Kay. So the question goes, can you provide examples or approaches to get an organization on board to show the value of an RMO? Maybe Ryan, you could kick us off, and Matt, you can add any thoughts in addition.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and that was actually the focus of the opening session at RMGS this year. It was a call to rise, for all of us in resource management to really be able to amplify the value of resource management and, of course, of our RMO. And so one of the challenges that I'll say we observe in the marketplace is, as RM professionals, do we understand the value in what it is we do? And that's the place that I would start is, can you articulate when you show up to work every day and you're in the weeds of doing resource management, all the things that entails, how are you creating value for the organization? And so, thinking about what those value elements are, and then can we continue to demonstrate the value to the organization? And then I think the big missing ingredient for a lot of us is the ability to communicate the value to the organization. And so let's break down a couple of different components here. How does resource management create value? Well, if we think about it, through effective resource management, if we do this really, really well, we enable the organization to be more agile. And in doing that, it's looking at something as simple as when a customer calls in and says, hey, we need to put our project on hold for 2 months, how fast can we identify the resources that are impacted and get them redeployed on something else? Okay, so there are a lot of organizations that when that call happens, it takes weeks to figure out, okay, who's impacted in the first place. And then being able to look at skill sets and availability and all those things and being able to put the puzzle back together. And so an agile business, I think super, super important. The ability to drive economics. And we talked about utilization. Utilization is your big ticket. And I see some of the comments in here. Utilization, especially if you're in an organization where you're working billable hours, that's your big ticket to articulate the value of resource management. And so, understanding where you are with billable utilization today, and can you track the progress over time if you're able to, through resource management maturity, elevate utilization. So that's a big, big item. So, business economics through resource management, a big deal. Utilization's a big part to it. Enabling more effective projects, right? And so we play a role. I realize we're not project managers, but we play a big role in giving project managers the ability to have the resources to execute their projects. And so thinking about project performance, so on time, on budget delivery, that's a byproduct of right person, right place, right time. And so it's amazing. There's an interesting industry statistic where if you don't start your project on time with the right resources on that project, probably not too big a surprise that those kinds of projects have a hard time finishing on time. They have a hard time staying on budget. And so resource management's a big driver of being able to enable, better project economics as well. And then you look at things like customer satisfaction, customer experience, again, byproduct, right person, right place, right time. And then employee engagement, being able to tie assignments back to work that aligns with employee career goals and objectives. That's a really, really mature element of resource management. Are you capturing that information? Is it stored in a system somewhere that everybody has the ability to get to? And are you infusing that into your staffing equation? You may not be able to do it every time, but is it part of the equation, part of the things that you're considering when you're trying to figure out who to get on, which project and all those things? And so I think I'll back up and look at the question and just make sure we're in alignment here. I think it's processing how we create value, being able to keep score on those things that I mentioned, the ability to tie those things back to strategic goals and objectives, and then taking the opportunity to communicate. And I want to spend just a second on that. I said that was by way of observation, that's where I think we have a tendency to struggle. And I would say it's a couple of different problems here. It's we're not taking swings when we not taking our swings in the box. When we have something good that's happened, we need to celebrate all victories and lift it up and take our swings at communicating. These are the good things that are happening in resource management. So we need to do, I think, and again, I'm painting with a really broad brush here. We need to take our swings and be able to celebrate those things and articulate them to leadership. And when we do, we need to put our communication, we need to choose our words wisely, communicate in terms of value created so that leadership can, see time and time again, this is the value that resource management is bringing to the table. And I want to double back as part of this to something Matt said earlier. Resources, the heart and soul of an organization. Wholeheartedly believe that, especially in a services organization. They're also the biggest cost line item in our organization. The ability to manage resources efficiently and effectively, the ability, let's say that differently, the ability to manage our most strategic asset, our heart and soul, that comes at our biggest cost, the ability to do that and do that well creates tremendous value for the organization. It would be irreplaceable value for the organization. So, I think that's a lot of what goes into demonstrating the value, showing the value there. So, Kay, I hope that helps.
And I feel like we could dedicate a whole webinar just to that topic because it doesn't end. There is
Definitely.
so much value to be
we,
outlined.
we went 45 minutes on that topic at RMGS a couple of weeks ago, so it is top of mind and something that we put a lot of value into.
Great. Thank you so much. And just before we're wrapping up, I would love to hand over the mic to you, Matt, and to really bring this discussion to life, having a quick look at Runn and how this all kind of relates to Runn in a tangible way.
Yes, excellent. Happy to do that. So let's maybe spend the next couple minutes just to start to associate. We talked about technology and how that runs a very close relationship with the resource management maturity model. So for those who may not be familiar with the Runn platform, Runn is a resource management and capacity planning platform that is really designed to help companies put their people first and do that by optimizing their workforce capacity and also aligning that with their strategic objectives. And one of the things we focus on the most is improving visibility. And what that looks like within Runn is being able to see things from a micro perspective, when looking at, maybe an individual resource, like Alan here as an example, being able to quickly understand, okay, why is Alan at 115%? What are we going to do about that? How can we respond to this before this becomes an even bigger problem? And there's means of being able to say, okay, are we going to move that workload out into the future, or do we want to, perhaps transfer that over to another resource that might have a bit more availability? The other perspective, though, is taking a step back and looking at this from more of a macro perspective and really looking at the big picture. And one of the ways that is often done is being able to understand utilization at a higher level. So as an example, if you wanted to understand, okay, what is our utilization across our central skills matrix that we have? What does this look like over the next quarter? What does this look like over the next 6 months? And functionally speaking, this is giving you that view, across your teams, across your skill sets. But strategically and operationally speaking, and Ryan touched on this earlier, it's helping break down those silos. Because one of the most common challenges that we hear, and I would say particularly from organizations of a lower maturity, is this information is spread across the organization. That they have this information, but it's siloed across various different systems, and there's really no single source of truth. And that's the part that, at Runn, we're trying to help solve. But a lot of this too is around forecasting for the future and having that visibility to be more proactive. And what that looks like in Runn is taking projects that might not have come to fruition. These could be sales opportunities that are in your CRM. These could be initiatives, projects that are still being discussed, but you want to be able to plan for them. You want to be able to understand the impact of taking those projects on. And if we just use skills as an example, and if we turn on all of those tentative projects, we start to have better insight into the future. And we can use this information to plan proactively, where we can see, okay, we have resources that are skilled in Azure, or in this case, C#, and we start to see there's a bit of a spike. So we know, okay, what are we going to do about this? Are we going to go out and hire additional resources that are contractors? Are these going to be short-term projects? We need to make sure that we're hiring resources with those skill sets. And Ryan touched on this earlier. As the maturity level increases, you start to gain more of that insight. You start to better position yourself to plan for the future. And we could spend probably the next hour, Nora, talking about visibility and talking about forecasting and how that relates to technology. I think the piece I would wrap it up with, though, is, and we talk about this a lot at Runn, and that is you can find the best tool in the market that checks all your boxes, fits within your budget, check. But unless the team doesn't understand the purpose and the value of the tool, and you don't have that executive buy-in from leadership, it can be very challenging to drive any change at all. And if you were on one of our earlier webinars in the series, you might remember some of the discussion around just how closely intertwined change management and resource management maturity can be. So it becomes really important just to make sure that you have those pillars of change planning established very early before you go out and start applying technology to process and start applying technology to your resource management function. So I'll pause it here because I could get carried away and go on for another 20 minutes, but I'll flip it back to Nora here.
Thank you so much. And it's incredibly exciting to see it all kind of come to life in a very tangible way in the tool. So thanks for sharing a bit of a glimpse with us. I really enjoyed that. And just highlighting, there is an awesome webinar coming up in May on the 28th. where we'll share back the results of the resource management unfiltered survey we have run, and very happy that over 100 resource management professionals have shared their answers with us. So in that session, we will dive into the key learnings, into the insights, what all of this means. So we would be very honored and happy for you to join Nicole, Hannah, and I on that session. Yeah, you're very, very warmly invited. And I can't believe this hour has gone by so quickly. Ryan, Matt, thank you for this phenomenal session. I love diving into the resource management model with you. Thanks everyone who has been here with us. We've had such a big crowd today with over 60 people in the room. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for joining us, and wishing all of you a beautiful rest of your day wherever you are in the world. Take care. Thank you.